What was an incident that ruined your innocence? Not a massive deal, but it's kinda, I was a kid and staying over at a friend's house. His mother said she needed to speak to me in private. She sat me down and explained that just because I had figured out Santa wasn't real, I can't continue to go around school spoiling it for all the others. That wasn't me. I hadn't been doing that and I still believed in Santa. Nightmare as a child. Walked into my parents' bedroom to get comfort from parents. Mum was full on riding Dad, and all I could say at the time was, "What are you guys doing?" Went back to my bedroom just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And my dad came in a few minutes later and said, "So what did you see? Mum was hugging you funny." Yes, she was. Parents were divorced. Dad was an addict. Saw him on weekends, lived with my mum until I was about 4 when he relapsed and some legal shit went down that gave my mum full custody. Didn't hear from him since, not even a card. 2 teen years were spent thinking he was on the streets somewhere living addicted and homeless. And that's the reason why I couldn't even get a card and he didn't pay a single cent of child support. Found out when I was 17 through Facebook that he got clean. Moved to Arizona, got married, had a daughter, had a very nice house with a big ass pool too. Edit, thank you for your words of wisdom and support. I appreciate all of you. Yes, we did reconnect when I turned 18, but it didn't go very well and it's an extremely complicated story. Why that would take way too long to type out. 3. I have gone to therapy and have done a lot of self-reflection and healing since then and know that the situation had everything to do with him and nothing to do with me. Crawling over a rock during a family outing to see my father on top of my mom's best friend when I was 11. I was crushed and scared. The real fucked up thing is that they made me keep it secret, which I did for 2 very long, tormented years. I was 9. My mum was abusive and I felt unwanted. We had a neighbor who loved me. She treated me like her own kid. She would protect me when my mom would beat me with a leather belt or scream at me or slap me. One day her husband called me over. I called the neighbor Mum her surname and called her husband Dad's surname. Basically, he tried to rape me. I didn't know what he was doing, but he put me on the couch and took off his pants and lay on top of me. My brother came knocking on the door, shouting that my granny was calling me. The neighbor let me go. I went home very confused that day. My granny wasn't even home. I told my brother years later that he saved me from getting raped. He told me he knows. My brother is 2 years younger than me, so he must have been around 7. My parents divorced when I was around 2, so for as long as I could remember I spent every second weekend with my dad. That was normal to me, and in and of itself wasn't a problem. All was a positive influence, though I think in retrospect I think I've formed myself into the man I am today. I believe a pretty decent one by learning from his mistakes as much I was molded by him. When I was really young he would pick me up Friday evening and return me Sunday evening. Then as I got older Friday evening turned into early Saturday morning, then late Saturday morning. Sunday evening became Sunday afternoon. Then one Saturday, when I was about 13, he just didn't show up at all. She outside my house with my bag packed, having waited for several hours. At this point certain his car would pull into the driveway at any moment. My mother summoned me inside because Dad was on the phone. Packed everything he owned into his car and driven through the night to be with his girlfriend who had recently moved interstate. So I wouldn't be seeing him that weekend or for the foreseeable future. A couple of years later he sent me a plane ticket to come visit him, and I went, more for the prospect of flying interstate for the first time than seeing him. But I did want to see him. While driving from the airport to his girlfriend's house, he made a point of showing me the pay phone he called me from. I really don't know what he thought I'd get out of that. We don't talk much anymore. Edit, I thought I'd insert this here since it came up in the replies, and I realized where I left off. Might have made this unclear. Apologies. I posted this at like 1 a.m. and immediately fell asleep. I stayed with him for a week, and no sleep. We had a good time. We visited a theme park and played paintball. Did a lot of fun touristy stuff. As a teenager I still felt very close to my father, even though it was bittersweet with all the ways he hurt me emotionally. I don't think he's abusive, just really not interested in being a father. So I was more like his young friend, and that's part of why I liked him. When we hung out we were just a couple of guys being dudes. I don't hate him. Don't, maybe I'd be justified if I did. But that phone call when I was 13, and the stinger where he showed me the phone he abandoned me from 2 years later, were definitely some of the most painful moments of my young life. I used to go over to my cousin's house after school for a couple hours until my parents got off work. They were 20 years older than me. Kinda like uncle age really. My uncle would go down on his wife in the middle of the house randomly. Their kids 2 years older than me would cheer them on. Fucked me up really. I was maybe 6 years old and taking a bath with the bathroom door open. I had a fear that if the door closed, I would be locked in forever. And so everyone obliged me to siblings and my mum. One day I'm in the bath and daydreaming. As a kid I wanted to be a director, so I would daydream entire movies in my head constantly. My eyes are closed as I begin to sink lower into the bath, when suddenly I am submerged entirely. Two hands were weighing down on my shoulders, and I quickly realized I was being drowned. I tried to scream, but my mouth was filling with water, so obviously I couldn't. Then out of nowhere the hands are gone, and I rise up to see my mother staring back at me with tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't say anything. Perhaps I was confused or just too afraid to. She told me, "I am so sorry," then turned and left the room just like that. Not the only time a situation like that arose. Just the first in my memory, and probably my first brush with the idea. Luckily, I survived all attempts and have since been able to enjoy baths as an adult in peace. My first year of high school was when I got my first allowance. $5 a week. I was rich. Second week of the school year, a new classmate asks me for $1 so that he can buy something at the cafeteria since he forgot his lunch. He will pay me back the day after. Okay. I loan him a day after. He tells me he'll pay me back when he'll receive his allowance next week. Okay. I only get money once a week as next week. I remind him about the $1. He says he has no money. Later that day, during lunchtime, I see him buying a brownie at the cafeteria. A tough but valuable lesson was learned that day, and part of me still somewhat hope he's still begging for $1 in some ditch at the moment. The first time I remember my parents arguing in front of me, my father threatening to call the police on my mother if we were not returned at the exact time specified in the agreement. As in, if we were not thereby, was the first realization my parents cared nothing for me and just cared about hurting the other parent. First time I listened to someone die, and I was a 911 operator. Spent years in emergency services after that, including a nurse. I no longer have any innocence left. Great human growth and development, and it sounded so awful that I was like, you mean there's no cure? Does the president know? Why isn't anyone doing something about this? And just being upset. Welcome to the horrible world of female healthcare, baby me.